We have our face representative from the borough of Manhattan.
What's up, family? Hit the like button, share the video, subscribe to the channel, and check this out because we're about to break down something that a lot of people saw, a lot of people had a reaction to, but not everybody is talking about it the right way. And I want to make sure we get into this with clear eyes and a fair perspective because this isn't about hating anybody. This is about asking a real question that every taxpayer in New York City deserves an answer to. And that question is simple. When did City Hall stop being the place where the people's business gets handled and start being a stage for a political performance? Because what happened inside that building recently is something you need to see and understand. And we're going to break it down in 4 parts and what actually happened, why leadership failed, and what does this does to institutional trust over time, and what it means handing over these type of incentives and what it means involving, now with the whole dynamic and the whole environment of it being a young mayor of Zohran Mamdani running New York City as the mayor connected to this event is asking the people of New York to trust him as he continued to basically drive New York City into the direction he feels is best for the people. Now, some people may disagree with that. Some people may agree. I'm not here to tell you what to think, but I believe it's an interesting conversation and where things are going under his leadership as Zohran Mamdani I'm talking about. But here's what this actually looks like in real life. You got a government building, City Hall in New York City, a building that belongs to every single taxpayer in that city, regardless of their background, their faith, their politics, or their personal beliefs. And during a Pride Month event held inside that building, there was a performance that you guys just seen. And if you watch the clips, they are circulating right now. Most working people will look at it and immediately say that this doesn't belong in there. And I want to be fair about this before I go any further because there's a difference between acknowledging a community exists and hosting a performance inside a civic institution that crosses a line most reasonable people can agree on. And the clips show men in very provocative clothing doing a performance that is, by any standard, sexually charged. And I'm not saying that to be mean. I'm saying it because that's what's on the tape, and a lot of individuals and critics on social media seeing this clip and seeing these clips circulate are basically getting that type of perspective, or I should say, that is what they are deriving from the tape or the video or the clip. And that's what a lot of people are saying. And the question isn't whether those performers have the right to exist or to perform somewhere. Of course they do. The question is whether that specific type of performance belongs in a government building that is funded by every New Yorker, including the grandmother in the Bronx who goes to church every Sunday, the Muslim family in Brooklyn who is raising their kids according to their faith, the working dad in Queens who takes his kids to that building on a field trip so they can learn about their city government. Because City Hall is not a private venue, it's not a club, it's not a festival stage. It is a public institution and it operates under a different standard than any of those places. And think about it like this. If you work a regular 9 to 5 job and somebody brought that same performance into your workplace during a company event, HR will be involved before the music stopped, and your manager, your director, whoever approved that will be sitting in a very uncomfortable meeting the next morning explaining their judgment. And that standard doesn't disappear just because the building has a dome on it and a flag out front. It should actually be higher because the people who run that building are supposed to be accountable to everyone, not just the people who voted for them or agree with their policy or agree with their politics or policies. Either you get what I'm saying. Politics, policies, and that's the part that gets lost in the conversation when People want to frame this as simply a celebration of a community because you can celebrate and acknowledge a community without turning the chambers of city government into a performance venue for content. That would not pass a basic professional standard in any other public facing institution in this country. And that's not a conservative take or a liberal take. That's just a common sense take. And the fact that leadership not only allowed this, but apparently saw no problem with this is where the real story starts. Because what happened in that building is one thing, but who let it happen and what that tells us about their judgment is a completely different conversation, right? Now, here's where the conversation shifts because what happened in that building doesn't exist in a vacuum. Somebody approved it, somebody signed off on it, and somebody looked at the plan for that event and said, yes, this is fine. And that's the person's judgment, is what we're actually evaluating right now because leadership isn't just showing up for the ribbon cuttings and the press conferences. Leadership is also the decision you make at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday when nobody famous is watching and something crosses your desk that requires you to use good judgment. And the standard for that is not complicated. If you are a person or are the person in charge of a space, whatever happens in that space is a reflection of your standards, full stop. And I want you to use that simple example here because I think it makes this crystal clear. So I think about a floor manager at any company, a supervisor, somebody who runs a team, and imagine that supervisor looks away while something inappropriate happens on their watch and then turns around and says, "Well, I didn't personally do it." And every person who has ever worked a real job knows that answer doesn't fly because the job of a leader is to set the standard and enforce it, not to perform ignorance after the fact. And that's exactly the lens we need to apply to Zohran Mamdani here because he isn't just some random attendee at this event. He is a man who is actively the mayor of New York City, right? Who is continuously requesting that millions of people trust him with the biggest municipal government in the United States, right? And this event is now part of his public record. And voters have every right to look at the moment like this and ask whether the judgment being displayed is the judgment they want operating at the top of city government for the next 3 years, right? I want to be fair here because I always try to give both sides their due. There have been conservatives who have used government spaces for events that other people found objectionable. And the standard I'm applying right now should apply equally in those situations too. Because this isn't about which team is doing it. This is about whether the person in charge of a public institution is making decisions that serve the whole community or decisions that perform for a specific part of it. And that distinction matters regardless of the political direction the performance is pointing. Because the moment you start grading these judgment calls based on whether you agree with the politics behind them, you already lost the argument. And I want to keep coming back. What I want to keep coming back to is that the problem here was never the community being acknowledged. It was a specific call that was made about what kind of content belongs in a civic building. And a leader who can't make that distinction clearly or worse doesn't think they need to and is showing you exactly how they'll govern when they have even more power and even less accountability than they have right now. All right. So think about what institutional trust actually is, because I don't want to throw that phrase around without grounding it into something real. Institutional trust is the basic belief that when you walk into a public building, the people running it are making decisions for you, not just for the people who look like them, vote like them, or share their worldview. And when that belief breaks down, it doesn't break down quietly. It breaks down in a way that spreads through a community like a slow leak in a pipe, and you don't always notice it until the damage is already done. And what events like this one do is they send a message to a very large and often overlooked group of New Yorkers, right? Religious families, working class families, immigrant families, you name it, in its entirety, who pay taxes into that city every single day, every single year, I should say, I mean, every single time they get paid, right? And have every right to feel like that building represents them too. And the message they receive when they see the footage is not a message about inclusion. It's a message that says the people running this institution decided their comfort doesn't count in that room. And that's not a small thing, family, because once you lose that group's trust in the institution, you don't get it back by just running a different ad campaign during the next election cycle. And I want to be clear about something because I know somebody in the comments is already maybe typing. This is not about free speech. Nobody is saying those performers don't have the right to exist or perform. That is not the conversation. The conversation is about venue and standard and what level of professional conduct we expect inside a building that every single taxpayer is funding, because there's a massive difference between protecting someone's right to express themselves and deciding that a government chamber is the right place for a sexually provocative performance, as a lot of critics and individuals on social media are saying. And those are two completely separate questions that keep getting collapsed into one to shut down a conversation. And the long term consequences of letting that collapse happen is that regular people stop engaging with their civic institutions altogether. They look at City Hall and stop seeing it as a building that belongs to them, and start seeing it as a building that belongs to whoever is the loudest, most politically connected at any given moment. And that erosion doesn't just hurt one community or one political party, it weakens the whole structure that holds civic life together. As we know, if you were to go into your job right now, you are basically you are basically hired based on your qualification and the possibility, if you do not know, to be trained to basically meet the standards of that job, or you're already hired based on the experience of you knowing how to do the job based on merit. And if you don't go in there and do what you're basically upheld to do, as you are getting paid for an exchange of your time for money to give a service, then you will be let go. So it's no different for these city council members that are holding a ball. Now, there's a time and a place for everything, but especially American taxpayers, and New York City being the highest tax state in the country, one of them, but maybe the top of the highest. I mean, I think California and New York City is neck and neck. That's a different conversation. But my whole point is that these individuals should be working every single time they are in that building, a government building, American taxpayer building, working on behalf of New Yorkers every single day, because that's what they get qualified in exchange for their service to do as public servants, as city council officials. Because a city only functions when the people in it believe that the institutions serving them are actually serving all of them. And every time a politician treats a public institution like a performance stage for their base instead of a service center for everyone, they take a small piece of that belief away. They could have had the performance anywhere else. Just why that building? A lot of individuals are saying, and I'm just having that conversation with you guys, right? And enough small pieces add up to something that is very hard to rebuild. So if you zoom out for a second, because this conversation doesn't end at City Hall, it actually starts there. And the reason this moment matters beyond just one event in the building that is, you know, involving Zohran Mamdani in New York City right now, which means every decision uh, he makes in a public role is fair game for voters to look at and evaluate. And this event sitting right there in his public record, waiting to be examined, I want to see what voters are actually thinking of all of this, right? When it comes to him working for the people, but what standards should be upheld instead of catering to the people, but leadership actually taking place for the best of the people. And leadership isn't always easy, right? You got to make hard decisions that individuals may not see long term wise to have their best interests for the future, to continue to uplift and actually have their best interests. Or let's say it as the truth, the uncomfortable truth, and being able to uphold that standard of truth and not cater, which breaks down institutional trust, which is the whole encapsulates this whole conversation I'm having with you guys, right? So, what I'm saying is, I don't think the right question is whether you personally support Pride Month. That's not what I'm talking about. The right question is whether the judgment this man, Zohran Mamdani, displayed, having authority over a public space, being a public servant, being the mayor of the biggest city in the country, the judgment you want operating at the top of the largest city government in the country, and most people across the political spectrum. If you take politics out of it for just a moment, you already understand the difference between supporting a community and turning a government chamber into a performance venue. That's not a hard line to find. Most reasonable people land on the same side of it without much debate. And the reason this matters going forward is a pattern that shows up over and over again in politics. The politicians who treat public institutions like their personal performance stage, while they're building power, tend to govern exactly the same way once they have it. Catering. The performance comes first, the optics come first, the base comes first, and the people who didn't vote for them, the people who see the world differently, the people who just want their city to work, they end up last. And that's not a theoretical concern. That is a document pattern. You can observe in a city after city after city where leadership stopped seeing their role as serving everyone and started seeing as rewarding allies and performing for cameras. And New York City uh New York City, or I should say New Yorkans deserve to be served to the fullest extent as a whole for all New Yorkers and American taxpayers and individuals who work hard there, right? And they deserve better whoever sits in that office. So at the end of the day, family, this isn't about being against any group of people. It's about holding every leader to the same standard, regardless of which direction performance is pointing. And Proverbs chapter 11, verse 14 says, where there is no guidance, a people fall. But in an abundance of counselors, there is safety. And what that means in plain English is that good leadership requires wisdom, accountability, and the willingness to make decisions that serve everybody in the room, not just the people clapping the loudest. And like I said, they could have had that performance not in the chambers, but they could have had the ball somewhere else at a city hall somewhere. You know what I'm saying? But let me know what you think in the comments. Do you think this crosses a line or am I off base? I want to hear from you. Hit the like button, share the video, subscribe to the channel, turn on your post notifications so you never miss a breakdown. Spread that peace, love, and positivity. Let the love supersede the hate, family. On that note, peace.